Hello. Hi, welcome back. I hope you had a nice break. No milk. No milk. Yes, got it. Training and the audience. I'd like to start a bit from Laurent and go back a bit about this problem about training and the audience. I mean, I have the impression that anyway, when you are in the room and you're training and you're working with the actors and stuff, you are relating to some kind of spectator, idealistic spectator or an audience. And so, how do you think the audience is part of the training, and how is like the audience part of the work you do with the actors?
Maybe I would say that first to realize for an actor or for a dancer that you are all the time under the eyes of somebody. Even when you are at home alone, you forget that you are watched, but you are watched all the time. Windows are watching you. So all the time, a wall is all the time watching you. So the first part of the training would be to make them aware of this being watched all the time. And then the gaze of the public or the position of the public on them is something which comes on the top of it. It's like you are watched anyway all the time, and somebody is then watching you being watched all the time. So it's like something on the top. In that sense, the audience as something outside watching is from the beginning part of it. Yes.
Do you invite audiences in your training?
As what we do before the premiere, we have a few runs with invited people just to have a test for the performers, and even the performers who know my work and are used to the presence of the audience. It's really tough the first time that people are watching them, and they have to go to them. If not, what I like to do too, I do it more and more now, is to invite just one person to be part 2 or 3 days of the process. So a bit selected person that I know we can have a good dialogue after about it. And it's interesting how the performer says that one person is much more difficult than a group. And they said when this person, we had it this week on Friday before I came here, so the one person came to watch the rehearsal, and the first hour they were completely blocked. So they had really to analyze in themselves why with this person it's so difficult, and it depends totally on the quality of the person. If somebody who looks a bit serious, who looks a bit sad, or looks a bit more nice, open. So I choose a bit. So I knew it would be not easy with her, with this person coming. So it was a kind of okay. Now they have to go through that, and they managed it very nice. But it's a question you have to say, and you have to tell the performer, because the performer doesn't say himself. From itself at the beginning, oh, I'm a bit tight today because this person, they make as if everything is okay, but you really see in the space when you look at them which part of the space they avoid. So you just have to look at them and you feel, oh, clack, it's here the point. And so you just make them aware of it, and you say, do you feel that you cut the space in 2 or in 3 and you never go there mentally? And say, yes, I go to. So it's really a kind of introduction to this new person in the space, and suddenly you feel when it's opening and that they get over this presence and what kind of freedoms suddenly appear again.
Do you ever give a task when you invite an audience to the audience?
No, I don't play with that. I don't say be hard or be nice. No, never. It's just a person I trust in terms that they know the work, or they are interested in the work, or I know what the kind of thoughts they might have will help us too, and this person will take something from the day together. But it's important when they come, they spend the whole day, at least. The best is 2 or 3 days, because it's a bit work for the performers during the rehearsing process to integrate this person. So just for an hour and they go away, it doesn't make sense.
What do you think? I'll just give you the word.
I just want to say that I always write from the very first week, and sometimes I rehearse for several years. Once a week, it's an open rehearsal, and anybody can come. And it's a specific time, and it's not a makeup rehearsal. In other words, I don't make up things like if people come here, it's a different situation. So once a week, it's open to anybody in the public. The second thing I do is I often show incomplete works to a public who pay. So sometimes the theaters that bring me get angry. So when I was doing Three Sisters, very complex. So when I first opened it, I only did acts 1 and 2, and the producer said, well, what is 3 and 4? I said, I'm not ready yet. So they can come and see 1 and 2, or they can get their money back. And they did. They saw 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, and then the next year I added 3 and 4. They saw the whole thing. The current piece I'm doing, Imagining O, was called a work in progress, and when it was done in the UK and in India, it was a work in progress. In other words, it's not finished yet. It won't be finished until I do it in New York next year. So I'm very much for process and opening to the audience and kind of blurring that line between finished and not finished, and undercutting the kind of ideology of Hollywood and Broadway in that regard.
Thank you. A question for you, Gisela. What do you think is danger in the relationship between the audience and the actor, or the spec actor in your case? I mean, when do you experience an audience becomes dangerous for the performer, so when a performance becomes dangerous for the audience? Could you say something about this?
If you're asking me based on the work I do, the answer will be never. I am not scared of audiences. I prepare the audience before the play goes so that they are not scared of us. And furthermore, we just work through in the rehearsals so that we are prepared, and we as a group, we are not scared of asking a dialogue with the audience. So we're just really truly, it's not that we are pretending that we are trying to get any ideas from the audience, because we are so much this different, the fourth wall and all this thing. It's really like we're truly asking for a participation, for getting to an answer that we actually don't know really. We have tried, we have investigated, we have researched, we have confronted ourselves during the rehearsals, and what we bring as a play is a question. So it's not that we just pretend, but actually we already know that. Because I think audience, and that's why I never had this situation, so I never experienced an audience as a risk, or I'm not scared of them, because it's I know I'm showing something that I need I'm interested in listening to what they're willing to say, they have to say. If they have nothing to say, it's also interesting for me, because then I know that what we are dealing, it's not really coming to them. So they are always giving me a feedback on the work that we as a group are doing.
One thing for you, Laura, but it seems from hearing you talking that the danger is very much in the fact that we share a space, and we meet, and we are together, and we are two human beings, and we have to deal with each other. Could you say something about that? Do you think there is a danger in that the actor and audience should anytime deal with, or?
I mean, the danger or the risk is you don't know what you are going to share together. And this unknown makes it, I think, a bit scary. But a real unknown, not an unknown where you are prepared anyway to catch it. That you really don't know what is going to happen. And that's, you cannot not be scared for that. It's impossible.
The only thing you know is that you are prepared, that you have done your work, and then you're ready to
but the preparation to this, the work, is not to know anymore what is going to happen. So you have no base which can hold if you don't get this connection with the audience. Although in my work, I don't know, I don't speak for yours now. That's why the choreography, and there is a very clear choreography, if they don't get this kind of connection to each other and with the audience, the choreography doesn't make any sense anymore. So it's totally falling apart. They cannot rely on the work in terms, at least we have some ways where we go, at least we know when we have to jump 3 times on this moment in the music. That's not exist.
Thank you. Pepe, but you challenge the work you do with Fix and Focus, you challenge a lot the audience, and to experience things or to be exposed to things that are also controversial and stuff. Do you ever experience sometimes that your audience has become somehow dangerous, or?
No, I don't think so. We put a lot of effort into our performances to make them very nice. We basically, our work is to take a part of the society that's been looking on and with prejudices and put that part of the society on stage. And that makes the way we react together in the performance space very important, because there is already a distance between the people on the stage and the people in the audience, if we draw this line, outside the theatre. So our work is often very focused on making connections between people on the stage and the audience. There's often a dialogue, and sometimes the audience also have roles in the performance and play parts of the performance. So no, we don't see it as dangerous. The danger would be if we were not able to erase the former way of seeing each other and make a new room for this evening's collaboration.
Veronica. Yes.
I got one thing.
How do you think? I'd like to ask you if you have some ideas about the problem of contracts between the audience and the performer or the actor, and how do you think, in your vision, what is the problem in the training if an actor is trained to acknowledge that there is a contract, that this contract can be changed, that this contract can be thrown away during the performance, create a new contract, and do you think the training is answering to this problem, or do you think actors are just go on stage and they take contract for granted and they don't have this flexibility in understanding within the audience and changing with them the contract during the way?
I think that with each performance that you put on stage, you establish a different contract quite early on. And with my work, I often work in rather intimate settings, for instance, sometimes with only 50 people in the audience, like to create more a space within the stage. And then of course that sets a very different contract. Like you would not even come to the idea of expecting somebody to act with the fourth wall. So I think very early in the beginning you also set the contract for the audience with which part of the body to listen, or so I think you establish that early on. And I guess you can still maybe rupture it, perhaps also consciously, but I do think that you create that. And of course, actors need to be open to work in certain forms that challenge maybe what they're trained in. But
Okay. Richard, I'd like to ask you a bit about rituals and how the audience is part of rituals and theater. If the theater we do is a ritual, or if you could say something about that.
Well, of course, the theater in and of itself is full of daily rituals, like waiting to get in and finding a seat and all of that. I don't know, in some of my earlier work, I challenged the audience very, very, very directly. So, for example, in a piece called Commune, which was during the Vietnam War era, at a certain point in the piece, we pointed to 17 people in the audience, and we don't have regular seating, so they were seating in the room, sometimes on platforms, sometimes on the floor, and we said, we want you 17 to come down to the center here to represent the villagers at My Lai. These were a village where an American lieutenant killed everybody in the village, and it was a famous poster which he says, and babies too, babies too. They just killed them all. And if they came down, we reenacted that slaughter with them in the center and then the other audience around. So it was a kind of ritual reenactment. But in the event that they didn't come down, let's say 3 people didn't come down, we'd say, let's say the dean would not come down. I'd say, well, here's your choice, sir. I wouldn't say it, one of the actors would say, you can select someone in the room to come down in your place, and if they take your place, we'll go on with the play. Or you can finally decide to come down, we'll go on with the play. Or you can go home, and when you leave the theater, we'll go on with the play. But we're not going on with the play until our conditions are met. Several times it took a long time. Once it took more than 3 hours where the play stopped because the people, or 3 of them, wouldn't come down, they wouldn't select anyone, and they wouldn't leave. And they thought, of course, this was just a theater and I would go on. And I said, no, this is not. We're now in a ritual situation. And we've set the situation. This is very serious to us, etc. Finally, they left. We went on to play. And those who were left, a lot of people left in the interim, 3 hours, were very ecstatic because they had seen some intervention of the real. One more example, in a piece called Dionysus in '69, which has an enormous amount of audience interaction. There's one part in the play where a performer is challenged by Dionysus. It's a version of the Bacchae. He says, I can give you anyone in this room to be your sex partner, if you let me. And the actor says to the god, I don't need you, I can do it myself. And he was a heterosexual man playing, so he says, he went up and he looked around and he finds someone. And he asks her to come to the center, and she does. And the rule is that you continue to make out with this person insofar as she or he, but in this case a she, is receptive, you go on. And if you get sexually satisfied, you've won. In this particular case, most of the time, but if the woman gives you any resistance, like pulls, it's over, you've lost, and then you have put yourself in the hands of the god and the play goes on. It's about 2/3 through. In this one particular case, they started to make out, and they went on in about 10 minutes, and finally they both stood up, they were lying down, and we were all watching, and they said, we really like each other, we're leaving. The actor and the spectator. And they left. And because again, and so then I was faced with the case that this was not the audience resisting, this was going on with the game, so I said, I need someone in this room to play the role of Pentheus. He's going to be stripped naked, he's going to be covered with blood, he's going to be dismembered by this, and I'll stand behind you and give you what few lines you need. And this young man, he was about 18, I imagine, 17, he was trembling, he volunteered. It was one of the most moving events it's recorded in the performance, because he came down and he had to undergo this ritual slaughter in the theater. Completely, naively, he had not seen the play before, and the play went on and went to its conclusion. So sometimes the spectators get into a surprisingly intimate relationship. Now, I would not call them ritual in the classic sense, but they're ritualized. That is, they're repetitive behaviors that have meaning. And the meaning transcends their just ordinary meaningness.
Okay, thank you. Laura, I'm interested a bit in the problem of communication when you work with the actors, because you work with them, as you say, to lose all the control and all these things, but at the same time, you talk to them. In the room, and so what happens when, for example, you refer to something, and maybe you don't, but as interesting to watch, or you're doing something, this is good, what you're doing, what are the consequences of being in this room and having this, to lead a training or a rehearsal situation, and to address it, something that the actor do as good or interesting to watch? Are you placing yourself, in a way, also as an audience, that they use as a standard of perfection? Or are you the standard of perfection of your actors in terms of audience? Or?
I think there are two phases in the work. At the beginning, where they don't even see or feel what is going on. Joris, who is going to come to work with here for the workshop further, at the beginning he was not even realizing that something was happening already in the space. So when I was telling him it's good, it was first that he learns, the body has to learn to have new perceptions. And he was saying, what is good? Nothing happens. and it was already a huge tension in the space. It was already a story happening, whatever. And after, actually, it demands almost a full piece to come to the point where you start to feel it. It's like our perception system is not used or is not sensitive enough to get this kind of perception, so you have to go there. So first, when it's good, it's not so much repeat this, it's more to realize that something is happening, to get used to it, to recognize that something is happening. And after, for when people know it pretty well, it's more to make examples. I think it's a problem with the actors, especially the dancers too, during the beginning of the rehearsal. When I start to tell them, I always have this case when I tell them that's good, and the next day they repeat it, and I said it's bad, and then they're like, why? Yesterday you said it was good. I said yes, but today it's not good. And to understand that it doesn't have to be repeated, it's not the point. It's what was good yesterday had to be understood in it. So in a sense, it's very restrictive, but it's to make the performer free after to decide or to feel what is going on. I don't speak so much about the thing. There's a lot of no for a few yes there, and it's not no in terms because of my mood or whatever. It's not easy for me either to say no all the day. Until the point where I said yes. Sedi Badace, the conductor, said, and I love this sentence, he was apologizing to the whole orchestra, telling them, I know I say no all the time for one time in the production. Yes.
Okay. Is anybody else who wants to say something about this problem of the relationship when you are working? I mean, do you put yourself as a idealistic audience or not? I mean, is there anybody else who wants to say something about this?
I think that, of course, as a director, you're not putting yourself in place of the audience, you are the audience. I mean, you're the person there watching. So, and the first rule, Grotowski taught me that also, was, you do have to be honest in your reactions. And no is a very good thing to say. And sometimes I do what I did this morning, tell people what to do, but more often I just say, what you did doesn't work, try something else. See how many times they can do it. So they are, no doubt, over time trying to please me or whoever the director is at that point, until you get some kind of yes or let's go forward with it. In that sense, you're substituting for the audience. But I think of the audience when they're finally allowed in as the water, and the performance is the fish. So the water has to some degree, be clean if the fish are not to be polluted, but also the fish can't go anywhere unless there is water. So it's the environment, the audience is the psychological and social and physical environment. And a lot of it depends for me in not working on the proscenium stage. When you're on a proscenium stage, you really have the audience can be shut out. But if you're in a space, if these chairs didn't exist and we were all in this room, and instead of us sitting here in an arc, we were moving through the room, Religion knows how to do this so well. We'd be much more encountering you as individuals. In some sense, the theater has abandoned some of the deep lessons that ritual and religion has to teach about staging.
Can I say something?
Yes. Please.
I guess we're still talking a lot now about theater as set in a stage. I feel there is, of course, also many other forms now that have really left the stage and that have also even abandoned totally the performer. And I think that what I find really interesting in the acting is that we do learn a lot about how we perceive space, how we interact with it, and there is many documentary theater forms now that, for instance, great walks in the city or are more installative, and I think very often they're developed by people who come more from theory or from directors, but I think it's also very interesting for actors to use our physical experience to create those walks, for instance, to choreograph movements, to think of how does it feel if I walk an audience member very, very close to this window, and how can I, as an actor, for instance, talk to the audience over headphones, or like how can I really direct his experience? And I think I see acting training also as getting very, very aware of an experience. And in that sense, when you work as an artist, actor, with the creation of this performance, you can actually substitute him in a certain way, because once, for instance, you have recorded a walk like this, you can walk it and experience it. Of course, you then also need to invite other people because you have created it yourself, but to a very high degree, you can also sense the physical sensation that you have created. I know this goes really into another area.
No, this is very interesting actually. This is very important because it's where I wanted to go actually. And it's very interesting that you're saying there's a lot of skills or qualities that an actor can develop and achieve from breaking out of classical training or putting that classical training in dialogue with other forms of training. So it's not just a problem of aesthetics, and I think this is very important. Yes, Laurent.
Just wanted to react on what you said, because I think it's very complicated to leave the stage. Many people, many tries that they skip not to work on a stage and to go in open space, etc. For me, the people are exactly like on a stage. I think the stage is not just the architecture. The stage is a way of perceiving, the way of relating to the other. And sometimes in performance where they just walk through the cities, they are just making the city to a stage. Or the way the performers are outside of the stage is still acting like on a stage. One second. And I think it's a very complicated process to say we go out of the stage and now we are free from theater.
I just want to clarify that now, for instance, at this special example, I was not talking about even having performers' bodies outside, but for instance, we did one walk where we used iPods with a film that would guide the audience, but we were not filming from a filmmaker's perspective, but more considering the movement that we would create with it, and at the same time talking and walking them through. This was a documentary walk, guiding the audience members to houses and to departments where Jews had been deported from. And so there is no performer anymore, but we had developed on documentary text materials, texts that we would talk, and so it is really more the choreographing of movements and an experience that you produce, and very intimate interaction because you really talk into the ear or have talked, and so it's really about the experience, about creating an experience. And in this example, for instance, when you were walking on the same street as you had walked before, or as I had walked when I filmed it, you would interact with the physical space, but on the virtual space, you were seeing other people walking there. So the past kind of penetrated the present moment, and it was more about sensing this, or sensually. So it's more about creating sensuous experiences, not necessarily about performing or acting, because there I agree, you take the stage with you, of course. You cannot just go out in the forest and say, I left the stage behind. But for me, it's about how, as an actor, can I directly address the audience, and that can take many forms. That can be like in a lecture performance, what we work on here now at the festival, but then I also really talk to you, but that can also be in very different settings or physical situations, spaces.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I want to go back to the idea of the idealistic director. For us, it's like very important to work with people that are with us all the time, like understand the basic idea of the production we're doing. Because we believe that the people we're working with are cleverer than us, and that's why it's really important to not talk about who's the actor and who's the technicians and so on. For us in the beginning, it's like talking about the basic idea of the production, and then probably it would be somebody else than us that comes up with the great ideas. So that's why we're actually, for me, it's really difficult to sit here and be clever, because I actually want us all to sit in a circle, like you said. We want to create this meeting with clever people besides us.
But how is the audience part of this idea? Because they're not in the room with you.
No, but for us it's like we're having. I think for all our performances we start with an opening night, actually, without any preparation at all. Some kind of an audience will be there, and everybody would just throw themselves into the idea of making a performance. Because why not just do it for the first time? Because for me, I've experienced many times that actors are, you know, like a bit afraid of going to the floor, do something. Sometimes, at least, if you just go and do this opening night for the first time. Actually, we do like run through every day. I think just running through some kind of material. If there's no material, it will be the people in the space with their creative ideas. There will be the sum of creativity and the material somehow.
Who selects this material then?
But that would be the selected audience called Jeppe and Sue, and the technicians and all the other guys looking at it. And of course, it's very interesting when actors are watching each other, being a part of that kind of creative process. Looking, saying, well, could it be interesting to do this and that? So, yeah.
Another part of that work is also being stupid. We try as directors every day to see ourselves as somebody who has not seen a performance before. So a lot of our work is making things very simple and very easy to understand for an audience. Sometimes the concept and the place we start in the performance is very complicated, and then we have to work to make it simple, to make lines simpler, to make action simpler, and all the time thinking about, we really want to communicate something to the audience, and we want them to understand what we're doing. So it should be very simple work. So that's also a part of our job, to say, I don't think I understand this actually.
Yes. I feel I have to open for some questions, so we have to stop it here. Yes, questions? There are.
From somewhere. It's to Laurent, since you are leaving. It was very interesting to listen to you yesterday, talking about both working with dancers and with actors. What it seems like, and it's also according to Richard, when you are talking and referring to working with actors, it seems like it's much of the material you are working with is related to some classical material or performances already written. What I wonder is, especially for you, Laurent, do you experience working with actors in creations? And could you talk a little bit about that? Because it seems like, for me, it seems like also this part of the work is sometimes also in one way done as something that you do outside, as a training, and not actually as something that is elevated up to the moment of relating to the audience. And that is the field of the dancers in some kind of way. And I'm very interested to listen to what you have experienced from working with actors that Wood is creating together with you. Okay.
So you mean more for the rehearsing process? Yes. Well, I was with actors, I was writing with shown existing texts. So not that we created, for example, a text or a situation or without text, and so we always have the base. But I had already the situation where the text was not. We did Lens, for example, at Büchner, and the text was a solo, and the actor was he learned all the text, all the novelle, and we were rehearsing on a way that he was jumping where he wanted and what he wanted to do with the text. So we created together, in that sense, the parcours through the text. And another relation was to Faust, in terms of creation with actors, when I didn't tell anybody what they have to learn from the text. So you had 10 performers around this huge German text, and they had to learn what they wanted. And at the end, you bring it all together as a kind of choir going through this text. And it's amazing. You think it's going to be war between them, because of course in Germany, in a big German theater, you play Faust. It's clear who wants to be Faust, who wants to have a Gretchen role and whatever. And I told her, to the man and to the woman, men can learn the text of Gretchen, or a woman can learn Faust. And it's amazing how it regulates itself. There were never war about that. It was pretty clear, if an actor follows his instinct, that and is touched by a certain passage in the text, that he learns this one. And during there are sometimes 2 or 3 learning the same passage, and we had to decide then what we take, but it was more clear because the actors were watching each other. So when one actor was making a try with the monologue, for example, from Faust, the others were watching, and they were all having a kind of, it was clear actually by watching which one is more interesting for what we search together. And they were sometimes helping each other because they know the text on stage, and one was going through, the other one were giving some sentences when he was not having it, or they were improvising with that. But I was very surprised that it is possible to have a process such open without that you have war between them. And it was really creative in that sense that I didn't know before the rehearsal, before all the improvisation we did together, how it would look like. Because it appeared through the group. And it was at the end that it was a big question for the people watching this Faust. It was actually from a sentence of Mephisto, who says, "I'm a piece of the piece." So for me it was, yes, okay, I'm a piece of the piece, so we are going to cut all that. So you have no Faust, no Mephisto. You have just people going through together like a wave. And it was a beautiful experience in that sense. The problem was just towards the end that one actress was starting to make problems, not because of I want this or this for other reasons. And then the trust in the group started to be difficult, but through the whole creation process. And at the end you have something which is so logical that people don't even understand how it appeared.
Okay, yes, we have one question there and one question there. Michael, right? And then Øystein.
This is a question for Richard. We've talked mostly about theatre and this convention of the fourth wall, but would you mind talking about how that applies to film and how an actor might incorporate the camera and the audience, possibly in training or rehearsal, to somehow open up for a more theatrical cinema aesthetics? Sorry, that was a bit long-winded.
Yeah, I've never directed a film. I've acted in some, so I'm really inappropriate. I would just be guessing because I've never directed a film. The ones I've acted in, I like because I never had to memorize lines. If I made a mistake, they'd do it over again. So I really, I'll say 2 or 3 words, but it's really just guessing. Film set, at least the sets I've been on, is always full of people. It's never, the camera sees you alone, but it's surrounded by technicians and this and that. Even if you're on location, there are passers-by, there are people. So I don't think the actor in a film is ever alone. At the same time, the camera is ravenous. It's very hard to not look at it. So the training is almost to ignore the camera, which is not easy to do. But I want to defer to people who have directed films, because I've not I've not directed them.
Is there anybody else who wants to say something about this? No. Okay. Yes. No.
Michael, in our workshop this afternoon, we can explore it a little further. Okay.
I think that in the camera, the actors don't ignore the camera, but they learn maybe not to watch at it or be caught by it, which is very difficult because it's a question of control all the time. Want to look at this place, but I think in all the good movies or the great actors, they are all actually having a kind of very intimate relation with the camera. So there is such a huge conscience of the camera relation. There is in this movie called 31st of August, I think, Norwegian movie. It's a beautiful movie from the relation of the camera to the performers. And there is one moment when the main character is looking in the camera. I talked with him about this moment, and it was not planned, and because I was amazed about this, and we met and I asked him what happened in this moment. And he said suddenly that he was really playing in this moment, feeling that he has really an intimate relation with this object, with this camera. And you see really how he looks in it, it's just amazing. But I think before all the time they know where is the camera, they play with the camera there. So in that sense, I would not say that like yesterday or 2 days ago, yesterday, somebody said that actually in movie they do it even better because they're really closing the relation. I think in movies they are even closer to us, the actors, than the theater actually can be.
Can I say something about this to you? Can I? I think it's it's a problem of there's a problem about manipulation, and filmmaking is an art that has a high level of manipulation in the sense that you're working and you don't really know what's going to be cut, how the material is going to be cut, and what kind of other devices are going to be used to create the perception of what's going on of the performance, or externalize conflicts or emotions or stuff. So I think it's very much like, in my opinion, this relationship with the camera is like being the thief in the same room. You know the thief is going to steal something, but you don't really know what, and you don't know for what this is going to be used. And editing in theater or live performance, it's happening right now. I'm editing. If I'm taking a pose which is long, I'm creating the tempo rhythm, and I'm editing this material with you here. And so this manipulation is done together. This is something I feel it's very hard for many actors to give up when they work with film. They have an idea of control of the journey, or they can't give up to this manipulation which is not in their control, I feel. I just wanted to say. Yes, Øystein.
Question for Laurent. You work with a lot of classical texts, and you mentioned your work with Faust. Do you, in your work, does your work presume or need a very educated audience? Does your audience need to kind of know Faust, you know, back front, in order to relate to what you were doing with the text? And to kind of continue on that question to the rest of the panel, what's your opinion on the level of education your audience needs in order to engage with your work?
I think depending how much education you have towards Faust, for example, you have another experience, but we don't say the one is better than the other one. It's like you have to have different paths. I experience it in public talk that people who are pretty naive about theater don't know much, or I mean, Faust in Germany, not to know it as a theater audience is almost impossible. But in other pieces, people don't know so much about theater. They have no problem with my pieces. They take it. The more difficult public is the people who believe to know something about theater, because then they have such a fixed way of looking at theater that when it's not matching to it, they don't look at it anymore. It's like if you go to the bakery and you ask for meat. So they stay there, they are asking for something, and they are making reports that it's not happening what they want to see in theater. So that's the most difficult public. People believe to know what it is there. But you have people who know less, who know sometimes nothing about it, and they completely enter in a beautiful journey with this. But I did with Ibsen, I think, too, with Dollhouse. That of course for an audience who knows the piece, it might be easier than to understand the transformation I make with the piece or what happens with the piece, because you know, you are used to watch it, so you have many memories about the piece, and suddenly you can maybe see, oh, what happens with the text through this way of acting it, yeah.
I've directed mostly classical plays, from Ibsen to Sophocles to Shakespeare to, I did a Faust, my own Faust called Faust Gastronome. He was a cook, and that was his alchemy, and we actually threw him at the end in a pot of marinara. The question is interesting because I've directed in India and in China. In China I did Hamlet in Mandarin, and in India I did Cherry Kabagicha, which is a cherry orchard in Hindi, and also in South Africa. So in those places, there was much less familiarity with those texts. And Cherry Orchard in India was an enormous success. It took place in 4 different locations, as my play pieces often do. And I think that the important thing is that you are offering to your audience a buffet, let's use the, and it has to be visually attractive. It has to have some kind of either narrative or something that's substitute for the narrative. In other words, Shakespeare did it very well. He addressed the aristocrats who we assume were literate, and he addressed the pits who we assume were illiterate, so that the theater, even more than the film, I think you need an educated audience for certain kinds of film. But I think the theater is a more popular medium than the film. It's a strange thing to say. It has a lesser audience, but it's more popular. And by that I mean that the theater, when well done, the live performance, when well done, it can perform for anyone. And that what you have to offer is something for everyone. Because you're going to take away things, because it's not only the question of the film where the film director selects what to look at. In the theater, you, the spectator, select, you do your own editing. You pay attention sometimes, you don't pay attention other times. You decide to look at this actor. I mean, I'm a peculiar kind of person when I go to the theater. I want to see what's going off on the corner. I want to know what the person who's not speaking, who's not in the scene, who's off, what are they doing? And I can judge. It's like looking at the corner of a great painting. If the corner of the great painting is blurry, I don't consider it a great painting. I mean, it's not in tune with the painting. When you look at the great Caravaggios, there's nothing left unpainted, let's put it that way. So, I think Shakespeare had the line, caviar for the masses. So at a certain point, yes, it's just fish eggs, but they taste good as well. And I do think the theater is a profoundly popular medium and will continue to exist, popular for the few. But the few is not selected by education. It's selected by taste for experiencing live behavior.
Okay, Laurent wants to say one final thing, and then we have to stop here.
I think too, with according to this question, because I have it many times in public talk, and or sometimes in a negative way, of people who say, "For whom is this theater that you do?" And I think we have to accept that maybe it's not everything for everybody, and it's part of the democracy too. That you have maybe in a Spielplan in a year, when you have 12 pieces in a theater, 2 are a bit more for specialists, and 10 are maybe more accessible for everybody. And I was asking these people in the public talk, why don't you accept that there is something that you don't understand, which is not for you directly now, but for others in the room. I think it's maybe a wrong way to think the popularity of theater or that it's nice when it happens, whatever, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. You do something and you see what happens. Like say Sarah Kane, you don't write for the audience. You write for the dead people, or for the not people who are not born. Or Kafka who says, I write for the rats. And
the meeting with the audience, actually you cannot plan it, and you should not plan it as artist. You do it and you see what happens.
Okay, we could go on long, but we have to stop here. Thank you, and especially I want to thank Laurent because he's going to leave us tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. So yes.